No worries, no worries.
Our special guest on today's episode of the podcast is one of the finest athletes to ever come from Slovakia. She held a career high ranking of number 5 in both singles and doubles on the WTA. Twice won the title in Indian Wells, as well as making the semifinals of the Aussie Open in 2008. Now she's the host of the Real DNA podcast, as well as a respected tennis analyst. Daniela Hantuchova, welcome back to Matchpoint Canada.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you back. This is the third time now, so you've become a regular on our podcast. Our listeners are going to expect a yearly update from you. I hope that's okay.
Of course, I'm a big fan of your country, and I only have the fondest memories every time I come to Canada. And actually, I have a lot of friends coming from your part of the world, so that's why probably I'm always keen to come back and talk to
Well,
you.
we love to hear that. When we first had you on the podcast in 2020, you were just starting your Real DNA podcast, which has had a wide variety of guests, both inside and outside of the tennis world. I see the last episode was from last summer sometime. So can you bring us up to speed on what's keeping you busy these days and what can we expect in terms of a continuation of the podcast?
Yeah, the great news is that it's coming all back this season. I took a little bit of time away from it because I wanted to rethink the strategy and the guests that I wanted to invite and what kind of subjects and topics we were going to be discussing. So that's all in the making, and I'm going to talk to my first guest of this season actually next week. And also, I was just so busy with my TV work, and I felt like after the season was done that I just wanted to take some time off and spend it with my loved ones.
It's more work than you think doing a podcast. I feel, at least for me personally, like when I first started with my co-host Ben, who couldn't be here today, unfortunately, I thought, oh, this shouldn't be too bad. One episode a week, in the evenings when I have time. But then all the preparation to go into it and getting the right guests and reaching out, it was way more than I expected.
Absolutely, one episode a week. I'm a long time gone from that that kind of ambitious idea. No, like you said, it's one thing is to listen to it once it's done, and it's such a nice feeling, and especially when um, both of us we get those nice reviews and how much the listeners appreciate it. But yes, it's a lot of work, especially getting the guests on board, and that's where it was starting to be tricky with my busy schedule, and then normally the guests would be quite busy as well. So that's why I decided this season I'm going to do less, but more quality product and really go deep into some things that I want to discuss with my guests. But like you said, totally agree. It's a lot of hard work, but at the same time, I do enjoy that. Like to be in charge of something from the start until the final product. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And just to see the growth year to year, which we've experienced, and we started just a year or two before you. So it really starts to pick up over time as well, I feel like. Are there any guests you can tell us about this year, your first guest, or is it all top secret at this point?
Well, it's not really because most of them are going to be my friends, and I thought, because I traveled so much and I'm so lucky to have amazing friends from my tennis days, I thought, why don't we dig into the cultural aspects of traveling the tennis tour? And so basically, I'm gonna use all my friendships and compare different cultures. We're gonna start with India, so you can just guess who's going to be the guest, and then we go to Japan, Germany, the States, hopefully someone from Canada as well. So just to kind of see the cultures and the countries and cities from my guest point of view, and also maybe how much they had to adjust being on the tour or doing their sports because of our different mentalities, and we'll just compare that. And I thought I'd give it this cultural kick this year.
I like it. I like it. Now, in terms of Canadian culture, hockey is so big over here, of course. And you've had a couple of hockey players on your podcast, Marian Hossa, Peter Bondra, and I just
Maybe
came,
Wayne would be the obvious choice.
right? So yeah, Wayne Gretzky, right? I just came in from flooding my backyard rink for the kids so they can have the ice ready this afternoon. Big hockey fan, of course. Are you a hockey fan? And are there any other hockey players that you'd like to talk to on your podcast?
Yeah, obviously it's our number one sport, just like for you guys, and I think we always have that thing in common that about hockey we can talk for hours. And yeah, I mean, that's where my friends, they've been so cool that, like you said, I had already a couple of them on it because they're just so funny. And yeah, pretty much with them, I didn't even prepare what we were going to discuss because there's always so much to talk about. And yeah, I mean, if I could pick one dream guest, that obviously would be Wayne Gretzky. So yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, he's listening to you guys now.
Well, I would love that. If you do get to speak to him, tell him the Canadian podcast wants to talk to him too, okay?
I will do.
I think your first tennis guest, maybe even the first guest you ever had on the podcast, was Darren Cahill. And
Yes.
Darren, of course, has had so much success with Simona Halep. And now we see the early returns as he's working with Amanda Anisimova as well. What is it about Darren that seems to just click for him, no matter who he's coaching on the tour?
Oh, his personality. I mean, he's such a great guy. I know he is always going to be there 24/7 for me. And, not too many people I have, on those terms back from my tennis days. And I know he's going to be there forever for me, and the same via versa. And he's just such a cool person to be around. The way he looks at life is just so positive and always upbeat. He brings so much energy to the practice court, to the gym. Traveling is just pure joy to be near him. So I think that's where all of his players play so well, because he just makes them so comfortable. He makes them happy outside of the court, which, with most of the players he had, whether it's Leighton, Simona, Andre, they're such a huge talents and stars of our game that with them, if they are mentally tuned in, then on the court they can really achieve whatever they want.
Did you ever work with him, either officially or unofficially, during your playing career?
With
Darren Cahill.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, absolutely. I was part of the Adidas program, so I went to Vegas a couple of times, and yeah, only thing he couldn't coach me if I was playing another Adidas player, but yeah, we had some fun rounds. Actually, I was his first player that he did the coach on court thing. I mean, that was the most hilarious thing ever because I think he forgot he had the mic on. Um, so it was just so much fun. And yeah, but even then, after we stopped, we always kept in touch. And yeah, he's one of my best friends, actually.
Did you find success right off the bat when you had a new coach, or did it take some time to develop that sort of chemistry and see the results come?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it varies. Sometimes, the click can happen right away, and suddenly you have all these great results because the coach is telling you not necessarily new things, but in a fresh way. But I always say that happens mainly because of the coach before. So normally I would say it takes, if you decide to work on something or start with a new coach, I always advise even the young players, give it at least 2-3 months. You're not going to be able to tell anything after a couple of weeks. Just like in a relationship, you have to give it time to grow, or to kind of you start to understand that maybe that's not the right choice for you. But after a few days or a few weeks, you can't really tell.
Getting ready to speak with you today, I was looking back, just refreshing my memory on your career accomplishments, and it shocked me to see that it's almost 20 years now since your first Indian Wells title. Does it feel like that one was a long time ago to you?
Again, great question. Sometimes it feels like it's even farther away than that. Especially when I'm not commentating, when I'm just taking my time off and living a normal life. I feel like sometimes I even forget that I was a tennis player at some point. But then, like, as soon as I get to the tournaments, or I go and hit few balls, that feeling is right back, and I feel like I never left. So it's like mixed feelings. Like I said, if I'm playing golf, or somewhere on the beach, or just having a regular daily routines. Um, Maybe the only thing that reminds me that I was a tennis player is that yeah, when I go to gym, I can work out on quite high levels, and and that's pretty much it. So as far as, like, asking me how I played there or there, it's starting to be tougher and tougher to remember. And I remember when the legends of the game were telling me this, I'm like, oh, come on, how can you forget how you played in Melbourne or in Indian Wells? And I'm getting to that stage.
My memory's shot since I turned 40, so it only gets worse, let me tell you.
Absolutely. I'm enjoying it. Well,
I want to ask you about having success like that when you were young. You also made the quarterfinals of Wimbledon and the US Open at a very young age. We saw two young finalists at the US Open last fall in Emma Raducanu and of course, Canadian Leila Annie Fernandez. And they've still got a lot of growth to experience with their games, of course. How tough is it to have a big win or a deep result at a big tournament when you're barely out of your teenage years?
Well, it's a nice problem to have, but it can be also very challenging because I'm a strong believer that you get the momentum only once when you start, and you better surf that way for as long as you can. So, like in Emma's case, seeing her changing coaches so many times right after US Open, you don't play around with things like that. Like you stick with whatever works. You keep putting the hard work in because you just never know when you're gonna lose that. And once the tour starts to figure you out, obviously all the coaches, players will talk about you. In few months before you know it, everyone kind of starts to understand how to play against you. So it's so important to use those first few months. Like, for example, me, when I won Indian Wells, I worked extremely hard throughout the entire season. I never relaxed until the end. And we just kept doing the same things and better with Nigel, my coach, Nigel Sears back then. And he was so good at, keeping me really focused just mostly on the tennis part because it's a circle, and one player comes and goes, the next one comes in, and you have to use that momentum. And that's where all those great legends of our games, like Hingis, Kleister, Justine, uh, I mean, Serena, Venus, Lindsay, when they had that momentum, they were extremely focused on what they had to do.
Back then, social media was not nearly anything like it is today. And I looked back at my first interview I did with you for an article back in 2009. And I asked you what kind of changes you'd like to see in the sport. And you said less media on the younger players would be a smart move. And we saw last year how Naomi Osaka was affected by the media, and she's still very young. Any suggestions for what can be done to help players, younger players, better prepare for that part of life as a professional tennis player? Because it definitely seems like mental health is at the forefront now of everyone's minds. We're talking about it more. So, what positive changes maybe can come with that to help our young tennis players?
Well, to me, I have a very strong opinion on that, and it's not a rocket science because we are where the energy goes. So if you're going to spend hours on social media and doing all of that, you can't be as a good player as you can potentially be. So to me, absolutely, if I'm the agent of, say, any superstar of our games, there is no way I would let them do the social media. It's I understand it's a commitment to the sponsors, but that's where the agents need to step in, the parents, the coaches, and just really protect the players. I never forget the lesson I got from Virginia Wade back in Eastbourne. It was the year I was doing really well. I just won Indian Wells. I think I made it to the quarters of Wimbledon, but it was the tournament before in Eastbourne. So I was kind of a big deal, I guess, in England, especially working with Nigel. And one morning I was reading the papers, and I was on the back page, like a full article. So I was so proud of myself. And Virginia came to my table, and she goes like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just reading the morning news." She's like, "No, you're reading an article about yourself." I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, I hope that is the last time you've done that." And that was
Wise words of advice.
because she says anything you read about yourself, it's hardly ever the reality. It's either too big of a deal, and then it gets too negative. Like only what you're doing, and only you're the one that's gonna look in the mirror at the end of the day. And whatever the media says, whatever the press says, that's their job. But you should not be reading any of that. And that's pretty much when I stopped reading.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice. It's tough for kids these days. They grow up with it. Like I didn't grow up with the cell phone and Twitter and all that social media. So it's easier, I think, for me to set it aside. But for a generation that's, used to having it around since day one, it's kind of hard to turn off.
But again, it's the choices we make. So if the parents are really strict on that, and they explain the kids why not to do it, I don't see a reason why it should be that difficult. I mean, I don't have a problem to turn off my phone for a week, and I'm completely fine with it.
My oldest child is 8. I'm going to wait at least the next 10 years before I bother getting him a cell phone.
Yes.
To go from the younger players, I have a question now for some of the older players. You joked with me last time that when you were in your 20s, you said, if I'm still playing past 30, I want my friends to kick me off the court. We've got two players who are not playing currently, but they're now 40 in Roger Federer and Serena Williams. And we hope they're able to get back healthy and resume the tail end of their careers. Do you have any inside info on those two? Or even if you don't, what do you feel they can both still accomplish if they're healthy and their bodies will cooperate with them?
Well, that's a big if they are healthy, because we know it just gets harder and harder. But I do not have any inside info. It's just remarkable to see that they still want to play, and at the age they are at, what they've achieved. I think the idea we had, and that's where Roger and Serena were so good to change that, because I'm kind of the same generation. All of us thought, okay, anything after 30, that's just embarrassing. But with the physio's knowledge and the rehab we have these days, and the fitness programs, it's becoming normal now. So I think, with me personally, it was in my head. I feel like I could be still playing now, just like Serena is. So I think it was for them such a huge step to change that setup, and they realized, hold on a second, I'm still winning these slams. Why should I stop now, just because that's what the generation before us did?
Be great. Selfishly, I want to see them both come back and have one last run at a major, but who knows? There's so much talent out there right now. I want to end with just a question or two about the Aussie Open that's going on right now. You mentioned to me you're not down there this year and having an extended break, which is something you could never have back when you were playing. But as you're following the tournament, have there been any results that have surprised you so far?
Well, just because we mentioned the age, it's so cool to see Sorana, Kirstea, and Alize Cornet still doing so well, because those are girls from my generation, even though a little bit younger. And I have to say, if Darren keeps continuing working with Anisimova, I know they are on a trial period now. I think she's going to have a great season. She's already playing well down under. So that next matchup with Barty, that's going to be, I think, one of the matches of the tournament for now. And yeah, Sasha, Daniel, they're all playing great tennis. So obviously, so much easier to kind of get an idea what's going to happen in the second winner on the men's side, compared to the women's part.
I'm going to put you on the spot with my last question just for fun. And don't worry, if you get these picks wrong, we'll just erase them and edit them out. But who would you pick right now as your women's and men's champion down under?
I think I go for Paula Badoza and Daniel Medvedev.
Very good. Yeah, Medvedev looks
I'm right. I'm gonna listen to this one.
Medvedev looks really tough to beat, and Badosa had such a great year last year, and she's just continued. Don't worry, we can change it and voice edit to make your picks the right ones, okay?
Perfect. Sounds good.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us once again. It's so easy and wonderful to chat with you, and we hope you'll come back, and looking forward to a Canadian culture episode on the Real DNA podcast.
Well, if your listeners have any suggestions, I don't think we can go bigger than Wayne, but hey, we need a plan B, because most likely, I don't know yeah, how this is gonna happen. And yeah, it was great to be back, and for sure once a year. That's a promise.
Sounds good. Talk to you soon.